Hello, and welcome to the Kemetic How-To Guide for Egyptian Pagan and Kemetic Practitioners. I'm your host, Sharon. Happy Kemetic New Year! If you follow Kemetic Reform tradition, which is what this channel kind of got started, then we observed our New Year's on July 18th. But a lot of other Kemetics celebrate Egyptian New Year's, or Wep Rodpet, on a date in August. Which date? Well, it depends on which group you're talking to. And today we're going to talk about a couple of books that deal with that. Specifically, the Egyptian Religious Calendar 2024, put out by Luigi Trapani of Amentet Nefret, and Everlasting Egypt, Kemetic Rituals for the Gods, put out by, it was written by Richard Reedy, who passed away in 2015. This book was almost done when he passed away, and it was published as a labor of love by other members of the Kemetic Reconstructionist Temple of San Jose. So, hats off to them for finishing his work. According to these different traditions, when does the Kemetic year start? Well, we will begin with the religious calendar of Amentet Nefret. And it says on the cover of this book that this is the 424th and 5th Great Year of Ra. Now, how did they come up with that? Well, as you might recall, the actual date that Sirius rises when you're not using a leap year, it shifts a little bit. Every 4 years it drifts by a day. And so the actual civil calendar and when Sirius appeared wasn't in sync in ancient Egypt until certain points. And there was a reform under the Ptolemies and so forth. They explain that a little bit in here. And it actually synced up, according to their calculations, in the year 1600. So we are 424 years after that. So it's the 424th year, Great Year of Ra, according to their calculations. Now, this book is a very comprehensive collection of listings from the Cairo calendar and various temples and things like that, and it gives you what's going on a particular day. They start their year with August 1st. That is Wep Rodpet for them. And what's interesting is, you know, it's offset by what we do in Kemetic Reform by about 2 weeks, but you can thumb through and you can find things like the 18th of August, that was yesterday, 15th day of the month of Toth, or Jehutet, and they have a whole list of different things from various ancient sources, and they mention the Wag feast, spelled here U-A-G. Well, that's the Wagi feast, as we observe it, and it's also on the 15th of Jehutet, which just happens to start 2 weeks earlier as we reckon it. So this is the kind of thing that, if you had a pencil and paper and some time, you could, you know, make correspondences and figure things out. You know, I've done that before. Actually, what's funny is Bob Breyer's Egyptian Magic also starts with August 1st and gives you the whole calendar, and that's what I started with all those years ago. And the author of this puts out a new one every year, so if you're thinking, well, you know, 2024 is almost over, actually, you know, the entries in here are still good. If you're going by the Egyptian calendar, you know, you can just do a little pencil work and sync it up with the current year, but you can also wait until next year when he puts out another one. Because some folks online said that this book was rather pricey. I was given it as a gift by a viewer, thank you. But, you know, if, you know, you're interested, you can always wait until next year, or save up and get this one at the tail end of this year, and again, you know, scribble all over it, and you can make it work. Now, the downside of this book is that you have all of this historical information in it. How are you supposed to use it? They don't say. As a matter of fact, the very first page of it goes on to explain The sources used for the reconstruction of the Egyptian religious calendar are only and exclusively the ancient texts, without addition or modification, because the main foundation of a righteous and truthful religious reconstructionism is the fidelity to the ancient sources, to the priests who have drawn them up, and therefore to the gods themselves. I sense a little bit of recondescension. And that's something that I talk about in other videos, because that is my approach, is, okay, those priests, they were human. Okay, they did the best they could with what they had. And yeah, there's a civil calendar, a lunar calendar, a religious calendar, and we have to figure out a way to make it all work. More on that in a moment. Now, for Everlasting Egypt, which I bought myself. It was about $30. First thing I noticed when I got it was, yowza! This is a thick book! And that's because you have rituals for 29 deities, 13 or 14 annual festivals, and 4 lunar rituals, all printed in their entirety. So there is a lot of repetition in this book. So don't think you have to read through and, each page is something different. There's a lot of repetition in here. And I can understand why they did this, because when you're printing up a book of rituals, you have to make a judgment call. Do you print your main ritual and then include separately all of the variations for other deities, which is what I did with celebrating the Egyptian gods, or do you print each ritual for a separate observance or deity or whatever in its entirety so that people don't have to flip around as they're using it? Obviously, that's the approach that the Kemetic Reconstructionists took. But it does mean you've got a lot of print that you're buying, so there are trade-offs to both approaches. And I can also understand why they were trying to keep Richard Reedy's work as close to how he left it. Nobody wants to viciously prune something that they're sentimental about, so I get it. But I suspect that anyone using this book is going to dog-ear the heck out of the pages. And speaking of using it, there are a few things in here, addresses to deities such as Sechet and Wepwawet, that draw from information that I couldn't find. And that's okay, because these folks are dedicated, strict Reconstructionists. They're going back to the original sources, and they're not going to be making something up. I actually went and found sources for some of their things from Eternal Egypt, the first book, and so I could see where they were quite faithful to the original sources. There were a few gaps that they filled in and used a little bit different judgment than I would have, but at least I know they're not pulling something out of thin air or drawing from something completely unrelated. Excuse me. So if I draw from anything in here, particularly some of the litanies to Neat, then I will be adapting them because, again, there's a different approach that I take, and I'll explain that in a moment. But if I happen to use anything from here, I will give them credit. Another thing that I appreciate is that in the introductory chapters, the tone that he takes is a lot more friendly and, doesn't smack of recondescension. The first book had a little bit of that, but they really lightened it up in this one, and, I really appreciate that. The only critique that I have with the various strains of Kemetic Reconstructionism, and there's a handful of them, and it's the only critique that I have of other forms of Reconstructionism, like Sumerian and Mesopotamian. And that is, one, whenever they get a good streak of recondescension, which, again, religious calendars has a good dose of that, but Everlasting Egypt does not. And, my Sumerian pagan friends, don't tend to have that problem so much. But the other problem I have is that sometimes the information they present is not very user-friendly. My job, as I see it, is to synthesize the library of information that very dedicated Reconstructionist pagans pour through in order to present what we have here, and synthesize it into a form that busy pagans can use. Because I'm one. I'm busy. I have a lot of things to do, not just this channel. So, we need something that somebody can immediately pick up and apply in the middle of a very busy life. And also, when I write things, I'm using the ancient sources, but trying to synthesize the language in a way that is easy to read aloud and easy to understand and easy to perform. That's where a little bit of my exposure with voiceover artistry and video and performance and all of that comes in, is thinking, how would you read this aloud and, you know, make it something that people can use. So those are the kinds of approaches that I take, and that is why I make some of the decisions that I do. But what I love about things like this is you know people are on the right track when you can have independent traditions that develop their work without even having contact with each other, but you can tell they all were using the same sources, and you can see the similarities and the kinship between what they do. So my overall verdict, should you get these books? Well, if you really want to have a wide library and you really want to have some in-depth resources on the Kemetic calendar, and things like that, sure, put them on your wish list. That's the drawback, is that they are a little bit on the expensive side because they're very thick. But if you are a dedicated Kemetic practitioner and you want to have a broad library and kind of cover everything, I would definitely put these books over some other ones out there, including one that is in bookstores now. So what do you know? I just gave you a book review that did not involve explosions or destroying books. Don't worry, those are coming. But in the meantime, as always, be sure to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and of course I have to give my monthly shout out and happy dance for all of my super awesome super sticker folks. Thank you as always. So that's it for the Kemetic How-To Guide this month. See you next month, and in the meantime, this is Sharon, wishing you sanity. Enjoyed this video? Then be sure to hit like and subscribe to the Kemetic Independent channel. You can also buy my books on Lulu.com, and special thanks to all my Patreon supporters. Join us for updates, outtakes, and exclusive videos only on Patreon. Check the description for links.